Hello, everyone. We're just getting ready to get started here. So we've still got a couple of minutes, people coming into the waiting room. So yeah, just give it a minute or two. And here they are. Oh, Debbie.
Got some superstars in the audience already.
Debbie, I've unmuted you if you'd like to.
Hey, super team.
Hey. Cool. Sorry, Debbie, was there something you wanted to say before we start?
Yes, absolutely. So we're definitely gonna have a party in the chat, but I think it's currently disabled.
Okay.
All
Let's
right.
see.
Looking forward to a great show, team.
Awesome. Let me see how I. Yes, Anna. So I'm just seeing because the chat is apparently disabled, but so I'm just seeing how I can disable that.
I put a test comment just to see if anyone can respond.
Yeah, we can see Chris's text, but we can't chat yet.
Ah.
Oh, hang on. No. Right. There's always something that happens, isn't there? Let me see what I can do. Yeah, bear with me. Experience.
Sorry, folks, we're just getting the chat working, so you can have some interaction. And hence Holly, our host, is probably a little bit unable
Yeah,
to
it's worth
speak,
saying I'm stepping in for someone today. So
speak
I'm just
and
trying to get the chat sorted.
okay, so it works for me, but nobody else.
Okay. Let me. Okay. Let me.
There we
I
go.
will keep work. Yeah. Okay.
We can chat now. Excellent.
We are
Chat.
winning.
Awesome. Thank you, Debbie, for letting us know. I'm going to I will mute you now, but obviously raise your hand if anything else comes up. Okay, here we are. Welcome everyone. We've got a lot of people signed up today. Thank you so much for joining us. Now the chat's working. I'd love to know what you want to get out of today, what you're hoping to learn. I will do a couple of introductions first. Hannah, if you can go to the next slide. So my name is Holly. I'm head of marketing at BabelQuest. I'm here just as the host today, stepping in for my colleague Bridget, who is feeling unwell today, so she can't join. The main event, our presenter, Hannah Fisher, she's one of our platform consultants here at BabelQuest, absolute guru in all things HubSpot and knows quite a bit about OpsHub too. We've also got Chris Grant. He's done quite a few of these webinars, so if you've joined before, you may recognize him. He is mostly going to be a silent participant, but he will be lurking in the Q&A, answering your questions as and when, or directing them to Hannah if she is to answer them live. So that's your training team. Just a note on the Q&A, as usual, if you do have a question, try to make sure you put it in the Q&A section rather than the chat. That just helps us make sure they all get answered. I also want to say a little bit about follow-up. We will be sending, you'll get an auto recording of this after the webinar. And then Following that, you'll get another follow-up with some resources that we will share from our own email. So, yep, I hope you, I hope that's all clear. Let me know if there's any questions about that. You're all, given the fact that you've signed up for an Ops Hub webinar, you all have some understanding of what it is, but we often get asked sort of, how do you think about it, or how do you explain it to people that don't really know? I think a way that we usually talk about it is it's because it touches all the hubs. It's like the glue that holds the hubs together. It keeps the data in order, and it can automate those repetitive tasks that happen that sort of transcend all the different parts of HubSpot. Hannah is going to show you some really cool use cases, and she is also going to be diving into the tool, showing you how it all works. And then, as I said, we'll have some time in the end for Q&A. And yeah, without further ado, let's dive in. Over to you, Hannah.
Thank you. Okay, so we're going to spend the rest of the hour having a bit of a demo of the Ops Hub, and hopefully I can show you some useful, valuable tips and tricks that you can implement yourself. And I'm going to talk about Ops Hub around 3 themes: cleanse, automate, and connect. And I'm conscious that we might have a range of skills in the audience as well. So I've tried to structure it where we can kind of get progressively more complex with the things that I'm showing, that I'm talking about. So it will hopefully hit everyone that's watching. Okay, so the first theme that I'm going to talk about is cleanse. So how we can use the built-in tools in Ops Hub to automatically clean, format, and maintain customer data. And each of the cleanse, automate, connect themes that I'm going to talk about, I'm going to try and keep it about 3 kind of objectives. So property, cleanse, automate, and connecting, duplication, and then formatting. These slides are not very exciting. It's more of a bit of a brain splurge, but I'm going to jump into our test portal to kind of show what I'm talking about and hopefully make it make a little bit more sense. So the first thing, and just double checking that my screen share has jumped over to the Babel test. Yeah, perfect. Okay. So the first thing that I thought was valuable to talk about, and actually, Holly, is this big enough, or do you want me to zoom in any?
No, that looks fine, actually, I think.
Perfect. Okay. So with Ops Hub, you get access to the data quality command center in HubSpot, and you can access this from the sidebar in their little data management menu option. I'm going to specifically talk about one of the newer parts of the quality command center, which is missing data. So if I open this up, it has the little purple beta badge because it is a new part of this tool. Missing gaps in data, it's important, I think, to highlight them, because if you're relying on this data in processes or in reporting, your data is going to be skewed. If you've got a report showing you the average margin for deals in your pipeline, but you're missing that field for 20% of them, then actually your report isn't that valuable. So this tool, for both contacts and companies, you can have a look for missing properties, which records have got missing properties. You can click on the button at the top. It's very HubSpotty. This is just for contacts and companies, like I said, and you can turn on to monitor gaps in these out-of-the-box properties in HubSpot, and just hit the slider if it isn't something that is important to your process. And I think that's actually something important to note as well. Like, if someone's state or their postcode isn't super valuable within your business processes, just turn the slider off and keep this missing data table cleaner, like reduce the noise. You don't want people to be told about those gaps if it isn't that valuable to you. Because this is only missing data in contacts and companies, a little trick or tip, which many of you probably know, is you can build out your own data health dashboards in HubSpot that work in much the same way. So you can reverse engineer reports to show you records in your database that have gaps in specific data points that are vital to your sales or customer processes. Benefit of doing it this way is that you can use other objects outside of contacts and companies. You know, you can use custom objects and you can use custom data points. And you could also add filters to that as well to kind of niche down in records that have got a missing data point, but it doesn't matter against the whole of the contact database. It's only of your customers. This data property is relevant to our customers. So we want to know, show me the records where lifecycle stage is customer and this value is missing. We do have a session, a recording on this, and we've also got an article. So I'm hoping that just by mentioning this, Holly might be able to add that as an action to send out to people if they are interested in learning more about utilizing the missing data beta, which I think is an exciting step forward here, but also how you can expand on that with your own custom processes by building out a data health dashboard.
Yeah, I will. I'll add that in the follow-up.
Thank you. Okay, and then the next kind of cleanse action that I thought was useful to talk about from a property perspective was another part of the data quality command center, which is called Property Insights. And this space for all of these standard objects, so it's not just contacts and companies this time, you get deals and tickets as well. I should have maybe mentioned, this is our test portal, so it's full of a lot of random very useless information. But hopefully you get the gist that in this space, it looks at the properties within those objects and it shows you these pieces of information, such as the sources where this property is being updated from, when it was last updated, if it's not being used or it has no data. So you can kind of dive into that. And if it's not being used, if there's no data stored in it, is it just noise in your CRM that you can remove? Or is it that you've got a process that's broken and that isn't being populated and it should be? Something else that I think is really interesting about this space is when you click on one of these properties, so I've clicked on an account manager in our test portal just to show this, that it does show you the fill rate, so the current fill rate for this property. So out of the 1,600 records, contact records in this portal, 87 of them have a value in this property. And I think that's really important when you tie it to some of the information that this page surfaces underneath, specifically the tools in your portal that are using this property. And if you're looking through this, then you can see that this property is tied to a key process in your portal. So maybe the asset name is lead assignment, for example. You've got a property that is tied to your lead assignment, which is a key process that you're using within your business, but it's only got a 5.38% fill rate. That is the problem. Like, that's something that you probably want to spend a little bit of time having a look at why, because that key process is not going to be able to work effectively with a big gap in the data that it's using to do its thing. Another trick then that I like to personally do in HubSpot portals, and again that helps you get around the custom object limitation for Property Insights, is building out active lists for key data points. So for example, what I mean with that is, if industry is a really key property in my sales process, it's what I'm using to be able to effectively assign leads to the right BDR or whatever, I'm going to create an active contact list that shows me all of the contact records that do not have a value in the industry. I can put that on my dashboard like we spoke about before, and just knowing that there's gaps there is useful. But the reason why I like to put it in an active list is because you get this performance tab on the lists. So hopefully over time, you know, you've created your report, or within the Property Insights tab, it's highlighted that you have an issue with this property, and you're then having a think and you're implementing processes to plug that gap. By having an active list and using the performance analysis tab on the lists, you can hopefully see that the gaps are going down over time, and that process that you've implemented to plug that gap is working for that key data point in your process. And again, you can use these outside of the standard objects, because you can create active lists for custom objects that you've built in your portals. Yeah, this was me showing you can use it for custom objects. Okay, so that was my kind of cleanse demo and tips for properties, and I'm now going to jump over to duplication management, which I think is another key common issue that people come to us for support with. And again, I'm going back to that data quality command center in HubSpot. There is an out-of-the-box drop-down option on the menu to manage duplicates. It's for contacts and company duplicates. I'm sure many of you have used this space or are aware of this space. A new update that they've launched recently, which I think is exciting, is when you review them, you can now be more granular with not just this record takes authority over this record, but specifically which property takes authority from what record, so you can ensure kind of the integrity of that newly merged record. Something that I think is really important to consider when you're in this space is being aware of data compliance. So it's really easy to review and just go, yep, and accept it. I've seen portals get in a muddle when they haven't considered what's happening to those email addresses when they're merging things. So for example, if I take this demo contact, Timothy Bernard, say this is the email address that Timothy Bernard has signed up for our marketing comms with, and I merge the records and I decide to set this email as the primary one. Well, HubSpot it sets the GDPR kind of sign up on the contact level and not on the email level. So you don't want to merge them and swap the email address to one that you do not have data compliance to communicate with, and hopefully that makes sense. So I think that that's always something to be aware of when you are merging records that have got two different email addresses. What else have I put on here? Okay, so another thing that I have used this space for is, that I think is really useful, is being able to export the duplicates that HubSpot surfaces. And actually, while we're on that, something to note is it will scan daily, and it will show you a maximum of 5,000 duplicate suggestions for both contacts and companies. If you have a really big data set, if you've got 100,000 CRM records, it might show you 5,000 and you like, great, I'm going to work through those. You get it down to 0. The next day, if it's back up to 5,000, it isn't the same ones that haven't stuck, or that the same issues are occurring. It's likely to be another 5,000 records that it couldn't surface the first time around. But jumping back to being able to export the duplicate records. So I've used this button with clients to export the duplicates and be able to then in an external spreadsheet implement kind of more complex merge rule sets outside of what this tool is allowing us to do. So HubSpot, I think, surfaces them based on, shared first name, last name, and that isn't always exactly a good fit for everyone's database for managing duplicates. So by exporting the data, you can put other things in place to say, for example, something that I've worked on recently in an external system that was integrated with HubSpot, they manage duplicates or flag duplicates based on first name, last name, and date of birth being a match. So you could export the duplicate suggestions from HubSpot and put that custom merge rule set in the external spreadsheet in formulas, and it kind of is then your action list of what to do back in the HubSpot portal, and it will export with the record IDs, so it's easy for you to find them and make those relevant actions. Okay, and then my final thing that I was going to talk about on the cleanse front is formatting issues. So again, back in that data quality command center, another one of the menu options is formatting. There are 7 automation rules that you can turn on in this space. I had to think about this, and personally I can't think of any reasons why you wouldn't turn all of them on. So I always do. I like that in this space as well, you get a log of the changes that have occurred, so you can keep on top of that as well. Within the formatting issues, name it looks at, email it looks at. More recently, they've added location, and I think this is really interesting. It's a really useful space if you are a global business, if you work with customers across different countries, because it will try and fill the location gaps like countries and time zones, which can support sales teams, which can support comms strategies, because you can target individuals or communicate with individuals in their own language. If you want to use the country to assume that, and or you can look at the time zone, so you're communicating with them in the time zone that they're in. Okay, and then I'm going to jump back to the slide. So these were for a cleanse kind of objective, these were the 3 themes, looking at cleansing properties, managing the duplicates, and cleansing formatting data.
Hannah, we've got a question just before we move on to the next section. Willem has asked if we could tell him a bit more about how you process duplicates after exporting. Is this in Excel, and how do you process this in HubSpot afterwards?
Okay, good question, and actually something that I will touch upon in my other slides. So
Chris might be okay. I was
yeah.
going to say Chris could say you could answer live, but if you're going to touch on that,
I was going to have
great.
you answer it live. I know you've got a really slick solution for this, so I was just kind of waiting on that one.
So you can, multiple ways you can do it, whatever your preference is, really. Depending on the size of the data set that you've got to merge. If it's fairly small, you could use the exported Excel spreadsheet with your formulas in as an action list to just manually find those records and do your thing. Or you can look to put some custom code automation in place, which is another thing that we're going to talk about, to do that for you. And hopefully that was a good enough answer, and I can keep going, but I know we've got Q&A at the end, so we can have a kind of deeper discussion on that if you'd like.
It's good to go.
Okay, automate. So I put orange dot, or Holly's put a little orange dot, because I think that these bits are slightly more complex to implement. So with Ops Hub, again, one of the fun things to me that you get with that is custom coded workflow actions, which really open up the art of the possible with what you can do in HubSpot. And I've put some examples of things that we put in place. So on a property side of things, I think custom coded workflow actions are really useful for you to look to values in your database that you already have, that you trust, and use that to populate or fill in gaps in other spaces. So one of those things could be, like I just mentioned before, if you know the country that someone is residing in, do you want to use that to plug the language gap? Maybe, maybe not, because I know that one's maybe not as foolproof. But something that we have implemented a few times is looking to the email address and using that to fill in the gaps in both the name and the country based on the email address using custom codes. So what the code in the workflow does, first of all, it splits the email address at the @ sign, so it gets that beginning bit. It removes any numbers from that beginning bit. It checks if there's a separator, like, a dot or a dash, which it uses as an indicator for first and last name. And it then extracts the first and last name from that separator if it exists. And if the first part has more than one character, because we often have like a h.fisher @ which wouldn't work. It would get the last name, but it wouldn't get the first name. And then we also put a formatter in there to make sure both of those names are capitalized. And then on the country side of things, it looks at the top level domain in the email address, so like .co.uk, .com, .de, whatever that might be, and it sets the country based on that. So if I jump into here, so oh no, I need to find it. There we go. So
into the good stuff now.
In a HubSpot workflow with OpsHub, you can put this custom code in, and quite honestly, the possibilities are endless. So I've just tried to pick out a few exciting use cases that I think everyone could resonate with as being valuable. When you build out these custom coded workflow actions, the first thing I'm going to say, and that this is might sound really obvious, but is put a description in there, because it isn't mandated, but you'll thank yourself later on when you're coming back to this, and other people will as well. When you put a description in, it stamps that on the custom coded action, so it's you can remember what the heck it was that you were building out in this space when you come back here later on. You can include in your code properties from your database, and then you get a little space to put your code in as well. I like to go dark on this and full screen as well. I find that easier to work in. And this is the code, like I said, that is extracting that first name, last name, country based on logic that we mapped out from an email address. Other things that I like to do as best practice in my custom coded action, and hopefully this isn't too small, is to put like error messaging outcomes in, so you understand what is happening with this if it isn't able to, in this case, if it's unable to extrapolate that last name or the first name, it's telling you that. And you can try and look at why. Like, is it because actually this doesn't, it shouldn't be able to pull it out because the email address is in a format that the logic can't do that? Or is it that you've got some issue in your code, or that you can build out the logic further as well? And then I guess the last thing, and maybe again, this is a very obvious thing to say, but whenever you put custom code in place, you get an option at the bottom to test your action, and honestly, just test until you're really, confident that your code is built in such a way that it covers your use case and all of those little edge cases, if you can manage it as well. Like test it with multiple scenarios. So for example, if this one, I would test different contacts with different email formats to make sure it did what I was expecting it to do. Okay, and then another use case, if I jump back to my slides, a newer use case that I've put in place for custom code was around consistently setting meeting type on a meeting based on the location of that meeting. And actually, I then updated my slides because since HubSpot recently launched a beta around meetings, I can't remember the exact name of the beta, but I can share that after. And they're sort of slowly opening meetings up as its own object. But I noticed within that, there's a new property, new to me, maybe I just missed it before, but called location type, which is another thing outside of call and meeting type, which I actually quite liked, because that enables you to keep your call and meeting type more like what is the objective of this call and meeting versus what is the location. And for location, I would keep it really high level, such as virtual and in person, and I'd drill down probably to say in person at our place of business, so at BabelQuest offices, for example, or in person at the client's office. And I think that this information is useful. Like, why I would go to the effort of putting this in place is it helps you to get insights into which types of meeting lead to conversions and successful outcomes. So this was another use case that we've built the code out to look to the most recently associated meeting on a contact. And if meeting location type was unknown, and then look to that meeting location. And we had branch logic out as well to say, if that location contains, you know, the BabelQuest office address, set it as in person at BabelQuest office. Location type, if it contained Microsoft Teams or Zoom or Google Meet, then it set it as a virtual meeting. And something that is exciting to me, again, something that I've struggled with in the past is being able to figure out what the enrollment trigger should be to enroll these records each time a meeting is added to a contact record, because we don't have meeting-based workflows currently. So the best way I found to do it was with have re-enrollment based on an active list and have contacts being added to that list every day that a meeting was associated with their record, which worked mostly. But if there was ever the instance where more than one meeting was associated with a contact in the same day, it caused issues and there were potentially gaps being missed. So with the new beta, whose name I forget, but it's something meeting, I'll find it at the end, you can now access meeting properties. You can create custom meeting properties, which is exciting, but you can access meetings from within other object types. So what you can do is on a contact level, I've done this, but you could do it on a deal level if you wanted to understand the number of meetings that had occurred against every deal, and then have the workflow trigger to make sure those meeting types were populated. You can basically create a calculation roll-up property that counts the number of associated meetings to the record, in this case contact, and use that as the enrollment trigger. So enroll the record every time this property changes, e.g. every time it goes up one, e.g. every time a meeting is associated to that contact record. Use the custom code to get the information from that most recently associated meeting, and then use that custom coded output to set the location type in this instance. Okay, and then the next thing I was going to talk about in terms of automation and how we can use it kind of ties in what we were saying before, kind of further conversation around duplicates. So the duplicate management tool in HubSpot, I think it is good for flagging duplicates. It also, like I say, you can export it and put your own rule set in place. You could put these merge rule sets in place in a custom coded action if you wanted to enroll your contacts and use the search API to try and find records that are maybe potential dupes based on different logic. Like I say, first name, last name, and date of birth matches on a contact one. Another good one that I've seen used is on a deal level, tender names being used, because in HubSpot, well, depending on how you set your HubSpot portal up, but if you are putting deals in HubSpot based on, you know, tenders that you found externally, it might be that that isn't a unique identifier property, but you could use a custom coded action to try and find deals in the pipeline where the tender name is the same and it's been put in there by multiple people, and kind of flag those as dupes. And I've put at the top here, tag as potential dupe, because I think that that's really important as well. You don't have to go like full in and say, I want to use custom code to find these duplicates and merge them together. If you don't have that much confidence in the logic, and actually this is fine, like you just want to flag them for someone to review, much in the same way as the Data Quality Command Center does, you can use the custom code to put in your merge rules and then just get that to tag as a potential dupe for someone to review and action accordingly. You could also use custom code so that the Data Quality Command Center looks at contacting company dupes. You could put custom code in place to try and find dupes within custom objects based on other, you know, rules, depending on your data model and what objects you've got in there. And then if you're feeling super brave and you're really trusting in the logic that you've built out, you could even put custom coded actions in place to auto merge those records. And you could maybe link these two things together to say, custom coded action to try and find records where these things align. So show me if this deal has got a tender name that matches with another record in the CRM's tender name. I want the action to be that you stamp both of these as a potential dupe, and then maybe that triggers a task for someone to review, and there's a property that then branches off to decide yes, merge, or no, don't merge, basically. Okay, and then hopefully I'm not going too fast. I'm conscious of the time. I'm trying to get everything in. The last thing that I was going to talk about from an automation perspective was the format data option that you get in the action in your workflow if you have Ops Hub. Okay, so in a workflow on the little plus data ops, you will have format data open as an option if you have Ops Hub. And if I click on the drop down, you'll see there's a number of things that hopefully are somewhat self-explanatory what they do when you add a property to format in here. Like a really good use case, a really simple use case is adding an amount of time based on a start date of a contract and a term of a contract to like calculate the renewal. And you can then stamp that in and then automate, you know, renewal comms ahead of that for, you know, internal and external things as well. Another one I was going to mention was this one, escape and URL encode, which was a newer one to me, and I was trying to think of a good use case for this. And then when I actually looked into it, I thought it was really valuable. And this is the one that I'm maybe going to put Holly on the spot for as a marketer. You probably use this more than me.
Yeah, so if you really want, say you've got like a review form that you really want people to fill out, what you can do, as you probably know, you can put in the URL at the end of the URL, you can ask it to populate and pre-populate some of the fields in that form. And then when you share the URL with the customer, they'll see those fields pre-populated, so it makes it a bit easier. This sort of allows you to do that in bulk, because that was quite difficult before. So if you are automating this to go out at a certain point in a contract, or by a certain trigger, that will happen automatically with no manual input from you. So I think, yeah, exactly, to add UTMs as well. So yes, I think that there's a really good, especially marketing use case for that.
Yeah, I was going to say, yeah, pre-fill in the forms, dynamically populating web page based on that string, and then UTM tracking. And I was thinking from a referral perspective, and I haven't actually built this out. This is something that popped into my head as I was thinking about this earlier, because we have the user object in HubSpot now. Potentially you could use the user object and this escape and URL encode to create dynamic strings for users to use when they're posting out social content, so you can track that, which we do at BabelQuest without using the workflow, which I thought was a good use case for it anyway. And then you'll notice within this format data tool action, you also get custom mode where you can type out your own formula, and you do have formula guidance, so it tries to help you do this. A use case for this that I've built out before is calculating commissions. So it might be that you have the format data action that has a formula in here that takes the deal amount or the deal margin, depending on, you know, what you're working with, and it calculates the sales commission. If you've got an overarching sales commission that, you know, is the same percentage across everything, or, you know, maybe it needs to be more complex, and you could have little branch actions to calculate commission based on other things as well. Okay. So the last objective then was around connecting data. So how to turn scattered customer data into a unified, actionable source of truth. And there is a red dot on here because I think I've tried to think of some more complex things for more advanced HubSpot users. Okay, so properties. The things that I thought HubSpot is good at from connecting properties is with webhooks specifically webhooks in workflows. And something I should maybe preface this with, and I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say this, but I'm not a developer, but via the HubSpot API docs and testing using Postman, it's crazy how much you can do without needing to be like a full-blown developer in HubSpot. I feel like it makes it really accessible to people, and they can start to gain a bit of confidence by doing more simple steps. So webhooks are triggers. They're real-time data sync triggers that they they're going to do something when data is pushed there. For example, and these can go out of external systems with HubSpot as well. So you can have set up a webhook subscription in HubSpot that is listening for something to happen to push data out. And on the same end, you can have a webhook to push data back into HubSpot. These are good for, like I say, real-time actions, not for batch processing. Don't build out a whole complex integration using these. A good use case, I think, is sending a webhook to an ERP or invoicing system when a deal is closed won to trigger, creation of that invoice in a simpler way than doing a full-blown ERP integration between HubSpot and whatever system that you're using. And then similarly, you might want to push data back into HubSpot that it's just the dispatch information from that ERP. You don't maybe need to do like a full-blown bi-directional integration. You could look at webhooks for doing that. They give you advanced workflow capabilities, and again, they help you to automate external processes, to automate things that are happening outside of HubSpot as well as in it. Things to flag are that there are limited response handling in the webhooks, so you do want to use simple use cases. Like I said, don't try and do anything too complicated with them, but definitely something worth exploring. And with OpsHub, you can trigger workflows of these. So like I say, when trigger something to happen in HubSpot when a webhook is received from an external place. So your ERP system is sending that into HubSpot, and in the actions, you can use your code or send out a webhook in an action out of HubSpot too. Okay, jumping to another tool within OpsHub is data sets. And I think this is a space where people often get confused about what they are. At a really simple level, I think that data sets in HubSpot are good just to niche down the properties that end users can see in reports. So if you want to enable your end users to build reports, but you want to make that easier for them, you can build a data set. So this is just one of the HubSpot defined data sets. And again, you can access this by the little data management menu from the main nav. You can decide which data sources you're going to put data in your data set from. So in this instance, it's got deals, companies, and line items. And then you can pick specific fields. So if I've built this data set and I give sales reps or sales managers access to it, these are the only properties that they're going to see in that data set. So it's much easier for them to build a report out because they're not there scrolling through, I don't know, hundreds, if not thousands of properties from across different objects in your portal, and they're not sure which ones to use. They might just not do it. So it's a good adoption tool. And it's just, streamlines the process of building out those reports. If I jump back, you'll notice there's another beta tag here for CSV data sources. So what you can now do in data sets is upload data from other places. So again, if you don't have the resource capacity to build out a fully grown bidirectional integration with another system in your tech stack, it could be that you just export that data from your ERP system. It's got financial information or inventory information, and you upload it to this data set, and that helps to link that external data to the HubSpot CRM record data, and you can then build out reports using that linked data for richer insights, I guess, across everything that's happening in your business. One other thing, I'm going to pick on this one, Chris, is at the top. I'm not quite sure what it is, but just to show you that in the data sets, as well as, that was the one I wanted to click, in the data sets, as well as selecting which existing properties an end user can see when they're trying to make a report, you can create calculated fields, derived fields, that does something for you. So it, much like you have the calculation properties in HubSpot, which we are going to look at in just a minute, you can put actions, get something to happen in here. And a really good one, I think, in here is the conditional formula field, so that if not this, then this. A good trick is this dataset formula fields builder is one of the only places that I've seen that has the AI for creating the formulas for you. So I often go in here, even if I'm not putting that formula in a data set, and say, how could I do this? And it will give me the formula that I can then copy and paste into a calculation property or in one of the formula fields in the actual forms. For example, am I going off on a tangent now? No, I think I was going to go back to that. Yeah, formatting, that was the bit that I was going to cover. And before I go off on that, so duplication, connecting, my kind of link that I made there was around you could manage duplicate in the ways that we spoke about duplication before within the duplication management space or with the custom coded actions. If you've connected your data with HubSpot, you've got an integration in place, or you're importing data, you can use those same things to manage duplications across multiple systems, not just from within HubSpot. And that was my tentative link there to keep that on theme throughout my my slides. But then jumping back to the formatting, so calculating properties to structure data across tools and reporting. So as mentioned then, in the data set, you can put calculations in place to do things with different data points that you've put in place. And it's got the AI there to support you doing it, and it doesn't have that anywhere else in HubSpot. In the property builder, you can create calculation properties. This is a pro feature. It's not specific to Ops Hub Pro, but I think that it's worthwhile talking about, because I sometimes think that people don't, they underestimate what they can do in this space, or they overcomplicate things with multiple properties and workflows to do things. And really, you could just use one custom equation property. So the example that I have on my screen is setting a margin threshold based on the margin of a deal. So having margin calculated on a deal level based on the associated line items, and then looking to that percentage value or currency numerical value, depending on how you've set it up, and putting in ranges. So if the deal margin is between 0 and 0.35, these are percentages, then it's going to flag it as a low margin. And if it's between this, it's going to flag it as a medium. And if it's this, it's going to do it as a high margin. Another use case for these custom equations is, again, jumping back to that sales commission. So I saw on the HubSpot community last week or a few weeks back, someone was asking, how can I calculate sales commission? Like, this is my structure. They get 5% on the first 15,000, 4% on anything 15,000 and 1 to 50,000, and then 3% above on anything above that. And you could do that in one of these custom equations. You could say, if well, I can't pull it off the top of my head, but you know, you could put it in this one space. You don't have to build out multiple properties to figure out what the different values are and then put that all together. So this is really useful. I wish it had I wish I could make it bigger. I wish I could pop this out so it wasn't just this teensy little few rows that I have to scroll through. I wish I could put doc text on it as well. I tend to build the formulas out elsewhere, sorry, and then paste them in, and then test. So what's going to happen, and it will tell you, so you can make sure, kind of test your code that it's doing what you thought it was going to do. And then the final thing that I wanted to talk about in terms of OpsHub on the similar thing. So formulas, custom formulas and data sets, you can put them in calculations. There's also a beta to put formula fields in reports. And this was one that we built out recently that looks at campaign data. So you can now access campaign data in reports in HubSpot. So what we did was put filters in place to kind of niche down the contacts that were linked to a campaign. You could niche it down to a specific time frame or a specific campaign if you really wanted to. Cost of lead generation is a renamed spend. I think it is total spend, campaign property, campaign spend total. I've just renamed it cost of lead generation so it's easier to understand. Count of leads is the number of contacts that are associated, that are linked to the campaigns from this report. And then we used the formula field, and you can build these out in much the same way if you're unsure what the formula is going to be, and you've got access to data sets. A good little trick, go and ask the AI to build it for you and test it out, and then just jump back in here. Hopefully they're going to put the AI formula help across all of these ones and you don't have to keep jumping around. But yeah, then we just built a formula property within the report. It only exists in the report. You won't get a property on your records that has this in. If you wanted that, then put it in a calculation property. But yeah, it summed up the total campaign spend, and then it divided it by the number of contacts that were generated from these campaigns, so we could calculate the cost per lead. And that is the end of the my demo-ish on OpsHub, and kind of a little bit of a brain splurge on things that I've used OpsHub for recently that I think are valuable, and hopefully other people found somewhat valuable too. And then we've got 10-ish minutes for Q&A as well.
Thank you, Hannah. I know Chris has been answering some questions. There's one still outstanding, but before I get to that, this one is actually from me, because I think it's an interesting thing to mention that we came across last week. So Hannah, very in a very lovely way, put me in my place this week, rained on my parade a little bit when I messaged her and Chris to say, look, what I really want to do is automate the process that when if we're sending out lots of marketing emails and you get people saying, I no longer work at this company. At the moment, it's quite a manual process to go through those, mark them as that they've left. So I wanted some way to automate HubSpot looking through those emails, looking for the trigger words, and then update the contact record. So I had a go at doing the code. I was super excited. It wasn't quite working. So I messaged Hannah and Chris, and Hannah was like, sorry to break it to you, but you can just do that through a normal standard workflow. So she obviously was very kind about it, and she showed me what the workflow would look like. But I think it raises a good question that you can overcomplicate stuff. So what is an easy way for people to think about when they could just be using a regular workflow versus how OpsHub is different, or when they should be using that instead? And this could be either of you.
Okay, I'll jump in while you're thinking about it then, Chris. So I agree, like I love all this like complicated nerdy thing, and I've definitely been guilty of over engineering things in the past, and I think that it was, you know, a lesson that hopefully all good HubSpot admins have learned, is to keep things as simple as possible. I think always try and do it natively before jumping into
Yeah.
doing something custom coded. And hopefully the AI workflow actions bit will
Yes.
help plug that gap if people are unsure if something is possible natively.
I think it's one of those things that it's really exciting to play with that sort of stuff. So you just, yeah, it is tempting to automatically go to that if you think, oh, something I can do something really cool there and show off my coding knowledge. But it's not always what you do. Chris, were you going to add anything to that?
I was just going to say, everybody on this session will now be itching to go away and solve a problem with some of this really clever stuff. And just like you, I had an issue I was trying to solve a couple of weeks ago because I'd been building a coded action and doing some complex stuff. I didn't think through it from first principles and just go, oh, actually, there's a really simple way to do that.
Yep.
So I think it's always be outcome based. What are we going to get to? And always try and find the simplest way to do it. And with all the new knowledge, just because you can doesn't mean you should.
That's the mantra. Okay, thank you both. We've got one question here. For cost per lead in HubSpot, can that only be achieved with Ops Hub Pro or Enterprise?
I think yes, because you're going to need formula fields. I'll resist Googling at the minute, but I think the formula fields beta relies on you having Ops Hub. But if we can, I can get back to whoever that person is just to
It was anonymous attendee, but but we can always drop something in the follow-up email.
Let me have a quick Google.
Whoever you are out there. Okay, while you're doing that, well, I'll jump to the next question. So do we have any documentation or best practice document for the calculation fields and implementing them in data sets? That might be one for you, Chris, while Hannah's Googling.
I suppose, do we have document? We don't really have best practice documented for
I don't think we do.
fields.
It might be something that HubSpot has on there.
Yeah, I mean, it's something that's fairly new that everybody's still getting used to, I think, in HubSpot. And I think best practice, a lot of it is keep it simple, document it. You know, anything you're building in HubSpot, give it a name, give it a title, make sure that your future self. I mean, that's a lovely concept of, you know, making your future self nice and happy, so that your future self or the person that takes over can actually see what you've done and why. So have portal documentation and don't overcomplicate it. And if you can do it simply, then do it simply.
Absolutely. Thank you, Chris. Hannah, it looks like you might have an answer on that cost per lead question.
You can access the formula fields in reports on any of these subscriptions. So looks like it's Pro Plus. Okay.
Cool. Hopefully that is that one answered. And then we have one from Ben, not directly about Ops Hub, but he'd like to hear our perspective on any best practices or recommendations for naming conventions, standards, frameworks related to reports, dashboards, and lists.
Okay. Good question. I'm rereading your what you've put. So best practice for naming conventions. A good and more, I don't know, that something that I like to do is on some of the assets now, so like workflows and lists, you can create custom properties and you can customize the create forms. So whereas historically, I don't know that I necessarily have a best practice for naming convention, whatever works for you, simplicity I think is key, but the main thing is it being used consistently. And by creating custom like list properties or custom workflow properties and customizing that create list form. So hopefully this makes sense. Like am I in Babel test still? Yeah. So you can create properties for the different assets, and then when you create something, you can. This is going to be a bad example. That was a bad example, but you can add fields to say much in the same way that when you have a create contact form, it says you need to give me these pieces of information, you can mandate it. So if you can put a naming convention in place and create properties at a list or a workflow level or asset level and put them in place, so when someone creates a list, it's mandated that they have to say it's for this division, it's for this objective, it's for whatever, and then that sort of helps with the naming convention. I don't know if you have anything else there.
There's a people side to it as well. I think the key is as long as everybody in the organization understands it and follows it, then it doesn't matter if you're calling your reports, blue, green, alpha, frog, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. As long as that's an organizational standard that's adhered to, enforced, and everybody does it, then anybody that's in your company can go and look at that, look for that particular asset, and they know what the naming convention means. So, but thinking things like, what's it for, the date it's being created, who's created it, the information that allows us to find it and understand what it does. And again, that's documented as well. So you can look in the documentation and find it. And if people aren't following the naming convention, automation can help. But then also there's the sort of nuclear step of taking away their permission to do things that they're not doing the way you want them to do it.
And I think you've got thank you, Chris. We love a permission ban. And Ben, you just followed up. I think Hannah's showing you the create list form there.
Yes, sorry. Yeah, much in the same ways that I'm getting lost in the chat now. So yeah, configuration, properties, make sure you've created the properties first for lists, other marketing events, whatever asset it is that you want to try and implement the naming convention, and then in the objects drop down, finding it. So in this case, list, marketing events, workflows. I think you can do this for campaigns as well, actually. Oh, you can. It's literally just that, campaigns. When you click it, you can just customize the create form in the same way that you do on the other objects, adding in properties and mandating that is given as well.
Can you no, that's a stupid question. I was going to say, can you add a default for any of those? But that would really depend on the type of list, so you wouldn't want to do that anyway, would you?
No, I don't actually know.
Maybe one day.
Maybe
There'll be some conditional list naming thing.
So Debbie's put a great suggestion in the chat pane, the sort of project department objective, target asset. So you're just piling all that useful information in there, making sure that it makes sense to the people looking at it. That's the other thing. Think about any given human and what they're looking at, what they're going to tell by what they can see.
Absolutely. We're just up on time. Thank you so much everyone for joining. Thank you, Hannah. Your demos are great as always, and thank you, Chris, for jumping in with those answers in the Q&A. Thank you everyone for listening. If you have any follow-up questions, do let us know. You'll be getting, as I said, you'll automatically be sent the recording, and we'll also follow up with some more resources. We've got a one-pager where you can look at all the details of the things that Hannah has mentioned on her demo today. So yes, thank you everyone, and we hope to see you on our next webinar.
Thank you.
Yeah, and thank you, Hannah, because I've learned stuff today. It's absolutely incredibly useful. Brilliant.
Thank you everyone. Bye-bye.
Bye.